I made $1,500 this week, and it felt horrible. Monday was clean, Tuesday was messy, Wednesday left me wrecked despite being green, Thursday knocked me out, and Friday, we brought it back. Same market, 5 completely different versions of me showing up to trade it. This is my weekly recap where I go through every session, the trades, the numbers, and whatever the market decided to teach me that week. Let's get into it. So coming into the week, the markets have been in hyper bullish conditions, despite the situation in the Middle East, which begs the question, do we have the means to continue higher, or is this the top? That context matters for understanding the week, because I was on the right side of the market almost every day and still made it hard on myself. On Monday, price was hanging lower than Friday's value, which was a textbook bearish indication, but since we were hyper bullish coming into the week, I was sizing up a potential long to value, believing there was no way we could see lower prices before referencing back. And on the break of Tokyo's value area high, I take my first jab long, with mixed results. The market didn't let me suffer for long, giving me my first loss of the week, but that changed nothing in my plan, as I decided to wait for a deeper retracement into value for the long, which I eventually got. And with this large lot, my second trade was on. And after a bit, I found myself in the money, but I would be lying to you if I told you the first loss didn't do any damage to my psyche. Every small prod lower made me want to close the position. I was stressing, but I held strong, and after a while this trade looked phenomenal. But the real fight happened at the top, with price hovering my TP for what seemed to be hours, and in my head this was where I thought the entire position was just going to revert on me. But no, price smashes my TP for a fat win, and that puts me at $500 on the day, and with that I decide to close my charts. So Tuesday price was hovering above value, and since we hadn't revisited, I was looking for a short towards it. And with price respecting Tokyo value area high, a bearish node at the volume shelf, I take a short and I quickly found myself in the money. But yeah, seeing my position going from 200 in the green to essentially neutral almost as quickly made me want to bail. And with price pushing harder against me, I started considering closing the position altogether. And honestly, looking back, it was pretty clear it wasn't going to work, and I should have just bailed. But I didn't, and for that, I got a fat loss. At that point, I was feeling tilted, and since I still believed we were going lower, I started fiending for another short, which I took based on, well, nothing. I FOMO'd into it, and I tried to make a case for it after the fact. It initially starts going in my favor, but eventually gives everything back, and I decide to bail out for a small loss before taking another large one. Now I have to admit something I'm not proud of. At this point, I'm on full tilt, and I take a long. Everything about it feels wrong. Now I'm not against flipping bias when the conditions are present, but I have rules for that. One of those rules is never longing on a break. Instead I wait for a retracement to a level or VWAP. And yet, not only did I not do that, my stop is sitting above it by a mile. Another important rule is that my TP can't be in the middle of nowhere. It has to be at least a 2R, and it has to be a relevant structure point paired with passive orders. Luckily, I come to my senses on at least that last part and move my TP to an appropriate place before the gods of trading can punish my hubris. With price going in my favor and sitting deep in the money, everything looks great, until I notice price struggling to move past this point. Fearing the worst, I decide to remove the risk from this trade, and then, this happened. This is why I don't like long in the top, and this, highly likely, is the previously mentioned retracement. Turns out the gods favor your boy, and we recover nicely, hitting that TP, netting a huge win, and ending with a decent green day. This day was way harder on me than I gave away. I failed to stick with my plan, forgot basic rules, and even though I came out green, I felt stressed out beyond belief for the rest of the day. Yeah, I didn't really have a plan. Direction was unclear. We were hovering above previous day value after a lower close. However, price was floating higher, and because of that I decided to aim for a break above Tokyo value area high. Unfortunately, I ended up taking 2 trades with no confirmation that put me in the red before any real setup showed up. I decided to wait for a more clear indication, and, after a while, we retrace into Tokyo value, where we break below VWAP and reclaim. And when it showed indication it was holding, I took my third stab long. Initially, this looked really good, and I was feeling hopeful. However, the worst possible outcome happened. Price reached the top of the range, stalls, and flings against me. Having spotted this noticeable slowdown, I put my stop loss at break even, seconds before getting taken out. At this point, my mental was shut. I took 2 losses and a break even that was nearly a win, and I desperately wanted the market to produce something quickly. Thankfully, the same setup showed up with a small difference in my favor. A large lot coming in the direction I was targeting, which triggered me to execute my 4th long. Do you guys remember when I said I wanted something quick? I ended up being in this trade for almost 2 hours as it chopped around VWAP. Eventually, the market ripped higher and we got a break above the highs, slamming my TP, netting me $525. I came out green with less than $200 and I felt hollowed out because Wednesday cost me nothing financially but everything mentally. I noticed that for the past few days we were trading into a bit of a higher time frame range, and this was the first indication of us leaving hyper bullish conditions. We were below value for the previous day, above VWAP and towards the top of the range, so to me the move was obvious. Wait for the price to break below VWAP, hold it and aim lower. Eventually we got a poke through VWAP that didn't offer any real opportunity, at which point it started to look like the move was just gonna happen without me. And I admittedly was already not in a great mindset, even though we were at the start of the day. So when price started to retrace towards VWAP, I didn't wait for a bounce, and I got in fearing price would rip again without me. Because of this, my stop loss was at VWAP when the full retracement happened, and I got stopped out. This really stressed me out, so I impulsively got into another trade, and you'd think that this would be a good setup because we are at VWAP. The only issue is, I don't trade bounces, I trade reactions. And because I was so tilted, I didn't wait for any indication that the VWAP would hold. I immediately paid the price for it, which put me $500 in the red, and before I could do too much damage to my account, I decided to close the charts for the day. Just because I closed the charts didn't mean my mind wasn't still there. So I spent the entire day going over the mistakes that I made throughout the week. I was committed to coming back on Friday with a different mindset entirely. For Friday, we opened inside of value for both Thursday and Tokyo, with VWAP looking flat. The range that had formed throughout the week had been fully respected on Thursday, and I couldn't expect a substantial move before a break. And since we had closed inside of the valley from the last day, I was waiting for a move higher. And on the book map, I spotted a single order cluster at the 7170s, and that was exactly what I was aiming at. As price broke lower from Tokyo value area low, I noticed 2 substantial lots coming in and getting absorbed. At that point, I made my mind, and was waiting for a break above VWAP, which thankfully I got. I entered long, aiming at the 7170s, and with a little bit of help from negotiations in the Middle East being back online, we got a rip higher that eventually granted me a huge win to close out the week.